So in late 2025, a Mexican water utility company observed an attack that was happening to them. When they were doing some analysis, they discovered that an unknown threat actor group utilized ChatGPT and Claude in order to learn about the infrastructure and how the water utility company, uh, how the stack all is put together. And using that, they were able to orchestrate a sophisticated and complicated attack. And this was all from AI making the inferences, doing all of the research. It itself didn't do it, but it was led by the instructors or the people who were orchestrating using that. And that pattern is something that we're going to start to be seeing more and more often as our AI agents, like ChatGPT, Mythos, um, Claude, which is also Mythos, OpenAI. Like as these things become more sophisticated, we can expect that the models are going to be much quicker at finding and exploiting vulnerabilities than we have traditionally been seeing.
Well, thanks for freaking us out to start the podcast, Andrew. I appreciate that. I'm sure everybody else does as well. With that, welcome back to another edition of the Zero Trust Issues podcast. I'm your co-host, Tony Pietrocola. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Joe Marquette. Hey, Joe.
Tony, gentlemen.
Well, as you heard from that fantastic story, this is probably going to become a new way of doing things. Everybody gets an intro to start. So let me start with, we have two guests today, which is going to be a very dynamic discussion. Andrew Desender, who gave that eloquent story, 20 years in IT and OT environments, in telecom, agriculture, critical infrastructure, which that story obviously derives from. He's currently a senior consultant at AgileBlue, but before that, he ran his own firm and consulted with one of our great clients in Canada, G3. And he specializes in adversarial training, purple teaming, OT security. But one little quick anecdote about Andrew. First time we ever met was at Black Hat, which is the big cyber conference in Las Vegas. A couple of years ago, we met in person for dinner. It was 114 that year. And this guy comes in to meet me at dinner and he's pouring sweat. And I'm like, man, was Black Hat that tough? Like, what the heck happened? And he goes, no, I just ran over here from my hotel. And I'm like, okay, where's your hotel? Literally at the other end of the strip. This man ran to dinner in 114 degree heat, preparing for a marathon or something, right, Andrew?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, didn't think that through with the heat.
No, not really. Just he poured sweat during dinner, and then I think you ran home, so you burned off dinner at least. So literally burned off.
First impressions matter, right?
Yeah,
that's how I'll always remember Andrew. Our second guest today is Dylan Marcoux, and Dylan is founder and principal consultant at Aurora Cybersecurity, and prior to that, he was a principal consultant at Mandiant and Google Cloud. So you might have heard of those. 10 years plus leading security consulting and SOC operations, cloud security, and advisory work teams. He's operated at every level from a shift analyst during a SOC to leading engagements. Dylan, a strong community and advisory lens with deep expertise and credentials that we've seen bleed over into our customers. So Dylan, welcome as well. Have you ever run in 114 degree heat?
I don't run in any weather.
Nice. Yeah, you're a smart man.
Yeah.
I won't tell everybody who the smart man is today.
I love it.
So Joe, our guests are coming at it from all angles, right? IT, OT, adversarial roles, cyber. I think this should be a really interesting discussion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think the topic, certainly AI and cybersecurity continues to be a hot topic, and both in almost every industry, and having you guys a part of the team is obviously a huge asset for us. Appreciate you being here today. I guess like before we get into really Mythos and a little bit more about it, I guess I'd love to ground people kind of in what this thing already did, why it alerted and scared people in the industry. I mean, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, but Anthropic's own testing found a 27-year-old vulnerability in OpenBSD, which is, again, as I understand it, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, like a system that's pretty famous for being pretty well hardened, to this point. I mean, as I understand it, millions of tests run against it, and in day one, Mythos found it. So, Andrew, I guess I'll start with you. What exactly are we dealing with here, and you had a great story that happened a little while ago. Why are security teams paying attention now? Why does it matter now?
That's a really great question, and that kind of brings to the point what I had said before. It is able to start reasoning like how threat researchers and how security practitioners, advanced security practitioners, think with its reasoning, with the way it's able to be going through. You mentioned BSD. Another example of this is curl. Curl is something that's used all the time by a whole bunch of people, and it's open source reviewed as well. It is really hard to find a vulnerability in curl, and it did find one that was also successfully. It found another vulnerability within curl that was remediated. And the reason people are paying attention is because it is able to do the analysis and find vulnerabilities at a speed that we normally don't see and operate at. It is fast, it is efficient, and it moves at the speed of machines. So it's powerful. And that is why so many people are paying attention to the threat vectors that it's able to produce. It can chain together a whole bunch of low and medium vulnerabilities that traditionally organizations don't necessarily worry about. We worry about our kevs, we worry about our criticals, we worry about our highs. That's what we train, and that's what we communicate. And this rewrites the playbook. This says now we need to be also concerned about mediums and lows too, on top of that.
To just giving us more work. So Dylan, in your consulting, you've seen a lot of things. You've dealt with a lot of people, right? CIOs, CISOs, maybe folks even deeper into the cyber stack. But when you're sitting across from these security leaders, I'm sure Mythos is on their mind. You've seen what we just talked about, and then maybe things we haven't even talked about yet that we probably have to start forecasting. What are your thoughts on that? How do you talk to other professionals about this? And more importantly, what are you actually seeing as this stuff starts getting leaked out?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, organizations may start to see rapid discovery of vulnerabilities stemming from Mythos or similar models, right? One thing, we're talking about Mythos here, but there are a ton of other models that operate in and around the same speed too. So something important to just note as we go through this conversation. But to me, this suggests that even if Mythos isn't publicly available, although there is Claude Security, so there's probably a hint somewhere in there, similar private or open weight models are being used by threat actors. While looking at Mandiant's recent M-Trends 2026, and yes, I realize the bias there, but I still enjoy reading that report as well. It is mentioned that AI hasn't been, as far as they're aware at least, leveraged in a significant number of incidents that they've responded to. When we think about models like Mythos, these models can still contribute towards vulnerabilities being discovered or exploited while threat actors are active in the environment, right? So this again just speaks to a lot of that rapid discovery and development of exploits powered by these models. I also do want to highlight here that within the most recent M-Trends report, this does confirm that threat actors now use LLMs for hyper-personalized social engineering, malware that queries LLMs mid-execution. So AI is in the chain, just not yet the primary driver, at least what they're seeing. And I would say that's very similar to when I have discussions with either AgileBlue's customers or other clients that I've worked with in the past. This is something that they're also seeing as well, especially on that hyper-personalized social engineering front. And of course, too, the time between vulnerabilities being discovered and announced and a functional exploit being developed is also likely to drop in the wild. So these models may also lead to legacy code or applications being targeted, right? We talked about BSD, we talked about curl. These are older, right, systems that have existed for a long time. But threat actors will do this to help enable more efficient lateral movement within an environment, or even something like privilege escalation. So the speed of vulnerability discovery and exploitation, I think, is a big pattern that we'll see in the future, and we're already starting to see.
Well, let me ask this then, because I think you mentioned a very key word: speed. Like, I'm sure some of these vulnerabilities outside of what Joe brought up earlier, they're going to be found. Maybe it's 2 years down the road, 6 months, whatever it is. It seems like speed, though, of what the AI tools can do is what's going to accelerate this.
Yep.
So, Dylan, if speed is the thing, and we all know speed is hard to catch, literally, what early warning signs can there be, if any, as security leaders are thinking through this?
Yeah, one thing that I would think about is that if you have a bug bounty program, right? If your organization participates within one of those can help act as an early warning signal, right? If you're getting a lot of what you might consider more automated style or a lot of low fidelity types of reports to those, you know that there are either the researchers or potential threat actors looking at your stack with some of these different types of tools. I did see that HackerOne and Nextcloud both did suspend paid bug bounty programs after waves of low quality AI generated submissions like this. So, if you see things like that within your organization, this is an early warning sign that people are paying attention or are using these types of tools. Another thing too, especially if we think about the LLMs that I was just mentioning, where threat actors are using these for that hyper personalized social engineering, or even some of those other items that I had mentioned. If you are seeing things within some sort of incident or event that you're investigating where, oh, only somebody who would be internal to the organization or close to the organization might know this, this could also be a warning sign that maybe the way that you govern and control AI usage within your organization might be going wrong, right? If I'm submitting data to an LLM that I shouldn't be, but there's nothing that's stopping me from doing that. I mean, I'm just trying to get my job done. Of course, I'm going to do that. I'm going to use this tool that's, again, back to the speed thing, going to help me do my job faster. That could be a warning sign that there are people that are using these tools that shouldn't be, and then that data goes up into some sort of cloud, and then these LLMs now have knowledge of this. So if a threat actor is starting to have specific queries, again, thinking about that social engineering aspect, there might be data up there that they have access to that they shouldn't necessarily have access to as well.
So it's almost like a soft signal, if you will.
Yep.
That of things that can be happening. So again, it's amazing and frightening. I'm gonna do the rest of this podcast from my bunker in the basement. Hope you guys don't mind. All by myself. Andrew, I'll pivot back to you and some of the OT environment questions one more time. You've clearly been inside of these environments running adversarial tests. Can you give us a perspective on, we talked about some specific examples here, from a general corporate within an OT perspective, like, can you get specific on what does an AI based attack look like from the moment something breaks, and really, if we can dig into what does this mean for OT environments where you have these legacy systems, physical infrastructure that can't just push patch Tuesday and call it a day.
So, I mean, you're right. In a lot of OT environments, everything inside of there is very sensitive. So you can't patch because you need to have uptime. The one of the thoughts that I like to put together is like when you're talking about security within IT, you have the CIA triad, which is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So those would be like the two long ends of the triangle that face up, with the availability being the bottom, because you care about data in an IT.
Sure. Okay. Explain that one more time, just to make sure everybody got that. Because I think
if you go up here, the CIA is it's a triangle that we have to describe what it is with a lot of the training. So confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which the two sides that point up are the confidentiality and integrity, and the bottom one being availability. In an IT environment, we don't care as much about the availability. It's still something that we care about, but we want to make sure that your data is confidential, and we want to make sure that the data hasn't been modified without design. Like, we want to make sure that the integrity of the data is maintained. In an OT environment, that is inversed, where you have availability as the most fundamental portion of that. You want to make sure that your systems are up. So patching isn't done as frequently in an OT environment because it affects your availability. And this is where a lot of these challenges are, particularly with AI and with a lot of the speed that Dylan was speaking towards. Because if you detect something weird happening in an OT environment, you can't just necessarily bring it down. People could be injured. you would lose productivity. The line itself could take a long time to go up, let alone damage that occurs to individual components inside of there. So it's really critical that you understand what is happening, what's communicating, what is your baselines inside of your OT, so you can have a little bit of a quicker, and it goes towards having other controls in place to protect what is happening on the inside, because it can move so fast.
Mm-hmm.
So are things properly segmented? Do you have the understanding of what it is? Do you have your devices hardened? Remove everything that's completely extra that doesn't support your line. So that is part of some things that can be done and that people need to take a look at within OT.
I do also just want to bring up one other side of that, right? Because Joy, you asked what does an AI attack look like in the context of an OT environment, and this just makes me think of one client that I've worked with in the past who's a mining and minerals corporation, and they had an initiative where they wanted to have like a fully autonomous, and I know this is probably years in the future they're talking, despite their internal targets, but they wanted to have a fully autonomous mining operation. So if you think about AI from that perspective, they're using it for the OT side. And if we think about this in the context of, inverse, right? Andrew's just talking about the CIA triad inversing, thinking about things like poisoning attacks on those models that are used to actually drive some of those autonomous functions. So just want to highlight that you should also think about this holistically, right? It's not just how can AI attack me, but how also can people attack my AI to have, again, from that OT perspective, real world impacts and potentially safety impacts as well.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. All right. So I thought I was scared, and now I realize just how frightened I should be. But no, I think you make a great point, and this does cross from IT to OT, and the issues are persistent. The challenges are different, but the threat is real to both of them. I'll throw out a stat that I'd love to get both of your perspectives on. You're coming at this from a little bit of a different angle. So as I understand it, again, Anthropic has said that 99% of what Mythos found, and I know that there's more tools that can do this, but their example, 99% haven't been patched yet, right? So for organizations, IT running OT, um, as you said, Andrew, downtime isn't an option for some of these OT environments. IT environments may have the same limitation. So what does that number mean, and what can organizations be doing now to recognize like the magnitude of that threat and that number? I mean, 99% is again a real imposing sort of threat profile of threats that haven't been patched yet.
So about that 99%, it's interesting. I'll take this from the OT side, then I'll switch it over to the IT side. With OT, when I was working with some previous clients, you would sometimes see that the remediation that is fixing is to replace the entire physical device because the vendor that's produced it just doesn't, provide patches to that anymore.
Sure.
And so with OT, you don't necessarily have ability to just apply patch. You would need to buy a whole new module or a whole new device. And we're talking tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more. So it's not just a simple, we need to get this patched. It's I need to actually replace this physical device because it just doesn't have the capabilities. And then on the other 99%, that could be because it's a difference between low mediums where you do have a lot of noise because everyone's focusing on the criticals, the highs, and the kevs. So uh, it's difficult. And then with the speed that we're going to be seeing of vulnerabilities coming forward with Mythos and other AI models, you're not going to be able to keep up. And that number is just going to keep going higher and higher and higher because people can only do so much patching. And we've been spending so much time trying to figure out how to find the patches that we don't really have a really effective way to be able to patch. And I think that that's just kind of putting a band-aid on a little bit of a larger issue because you're going to have to, to go back to the other things, train the people, improve the systems, do hardening. Like you have to take care of the other things to help mitigate the vulnerabilities that can exist within your own environment.
Dylan, anything
One,
to chip on there?
yeah, yep. One other thing just to think about there too is, again, sort of the inverse of that, right? If we think about the organizations that are part of Project Glasswing, I'm even thinking about the Linux Foundation here too, and all the open source projects that, let's be real, they run the world, right? If all of these different organizations, including the open source projects where it's literally just some guy or a group of people that maintain it, if they're going to get inundated with a bunch of, hey, we found all this, please fix this, that to me is probably going to be where that bottleneck is, right? So even if there is like a disclosed vulnerability or something of that nature, once that news comes out, I'm sure it's just a matter of time before somebody develops a proof of concept exploit for it. And then we start to see those things go wild. And we have a lot of organizations, a lot of individuals who will, I don't know, depending on the severity, of course, have to maybe reprioritize their workload, right? But if we are coming out with hundreds to thousands of vulnerabilities from Mythos or whichever model, then that you can see how that is going to become a bit of a problem. So it goes back to a lot of what Andrew said, knowing what you have, where it is, and even some other strategies that you have to help protect what you're protecting.
So Dylan, real quick question then. As you help people think about prioritizing, right? Not everything can be a priority, but it seems to be. And obviously budgets do have, they're not finite either. So as you,
Yep.
as C-level, whether that's a CIO or CISO, or maybe it's even a CEO or president of a company, whatever it might be, how do you help them prioritize? What are the one or two things they really need to think about prioritizing when it comes to this type of security? Again, and not everything can be done.
For sure. My favorite way to do this type of prioritization is through threat modeling. There's a couple of ways that you can spin that. One thing that I would think about is if you know your digital crown jewels, i.e., the systems that keep your business going, taking that listing and then starting to find out, okay, which ones either are public facing, so they have the most exposure to potential attacks, right, or which ones might have the highest business or technical impact if they were to go down, if the data were to be stolen or made public. Start to look at those and then start to apply that threat model lens, right? Because the threat model lens will help you identify what could go wrong, and then how you can start to fix that. And that can help with that prioritization, right? If you run through a few different threat models with some of your top systems and you realize, okay, well, we tag this as a digital crown jewel, but the impact isn't as bad as we thought it was when we start to think about or map out what this might look like if it were compromised or if it were to be taken offline, some sort of operational issue caused by some sort of threat actor activity like a denial of service or something of that nature. That can help you prioritize what you might want to focus on first from a defensive perspective for those different types of systems. The other way to use threat modeling is just more cast a wide net. You can even perform like very just quick rudimentary threat modeling. Adam Shostak has a 4-question framework. So you could apply that to each of those different systems and then just start to understand, okay, we should put our energy and focus here. Obviously, if it was me in the chair, I would probably start to look at what are our digital crown jewels first, and then start to perform some threat models based on that. And then that can help you identify where you'd want to improve defenses. One other thing that I'll add here too is that when you do a threat model, yes, you're looking at a specific scope, a specific system, application, whatever it may be. However, some of the findings that you have from a threat model may impact multiple systems, right? So for example, if you're looking at an application that's sitting on a Windows server and you're looking at your configuration at the operating system level and you go, oh, this threat scenario could materialize here because our operating system is configured this way, or we won't be able to detect this because our logging is configured in this way. Well, if you think about something like the infrastructure layer, any fixes that you have from that can be a bit of a force multiplier, right? You're looking at one system, but you could apply those fixes to that system, but they may impact your whole fleet within the organization.
Well, it's interesting because the threat modeling and everything you described makes perfect sense. I get the sense that there's a change in the speed that we spoke about earlier, and the prioritization feels different in that the time it takes to address and remediate in a deliberate, we're going to establish the priorities, and then we're going to do the very things that you said, and then we're going to take that to budgeting, and then we're going to get that approved, and then that might have to go to the board, and then like all this stuff, like the speed, by the way, the meantime that those risks are occurring, it's like the wave is coming. It's not it's not just like you can just sort of like trickle in at that, right? Am I reading this correctly? I mean, I feel like the historical way of organizations prioritizing their investments and their defensive postures, like it's almost like we got to look at things a bit differently now. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. I think it really, to me, it just boils down to the speed and then the speed of organizations. And, especially in my experience, the larger an organization gets, the slower it is, right? So I think from that perspective, there probably needs to be either some changes to some processes or how organizations think about these types of threats. And even on top of that, even if you do make all of the changes, the you're still beholden to being the security team, right? So what I mean by this is, I'm sure we've all experienced this where, hey, there's something that's gone wrong, right? Think about like even Log4j, for example. This is we need to fix this right now. How successful were you in fixing that? Because, imagine like 3 Log4js a year or something of that nature, just on the back of Mythos or other models, right? So yeah, I would agree with those points.
I was just working with a client the other day that had Log4j pop up, and it's 5 years since that got diagnosed or got disclosed.
Are we in a bit of a valley in between where we become aware of the massive threats, the remediation of our systems and updates before we get to a much higher plane of collective defensive posture?
I think that this is kind of the tip of the iceberg, and I don't necessarily know if things are going to get better, because anytime that you do any form of checking in with your code, you're always going to have the possibility of having vulnerabilities being coming out. Two systems merge, you have the possibility of that. If we were to use AI to protect against AI, maybe these things will be coming down. But AI is only as good as the operator that sits behind it at the end of the day. And you need to have highly trained people who know how to use the AI to really get the benefit out of that. As we saw with the combination of Claude and ChatGPT with the story we had at the introduction.
Right.
I do think that we're going to have a larger vulnerability thing that comes through, but as you pointed out, it's expensive to be able to replace that. I think that while we're not going to ever stop patching, we're going to start seeing a paradigm shift towards other methods of control to help prevent and to protect, on top of just having the focus on vulnerabilities. It's a little bit of a game of whack-a-mole, which doesn't really work. One thing I also want to mention is the analogy of the bear. If Dylan and I were running away from a bear, I don't have to necessarily worry about being faster than the bear. I just need to be faster than Dylan. And in a lot of ways, organizations can protect themselves from maybe not necessarily nation state, but from motivated actors by making themselves more difficult, make them, to bring it back to ROI, make it cost more money, make you move slowly, and be more expensive than the guy that's sitting next to you in order to infiltrate.
Or Andrew, you can just trip Dylan, and that's his problem. Either way.
So you're saying hack into Dylan's machine and make it easier for him to go and get attacked?
Yeah,
I'm just saying physically if the bear's chasing you. So those are great ways to end this podcast, because I think you guys brought out some real ideas that whoever listens to this thing can take away and apply to their business. And I think this is the type of conversation everyone needs to be having, whether you have a boardroom or maybe it's a board Zoom call, whatever it might be. I think everybody has to be having this conversation, and something tells me they're not, right? So, gentlemen, this has been fantastic. Really appreciate the deep dive and how you brought it down to a practical level with these examples. If anybody has any questions, like talk to Andrew or Dylan, head over to AgileBlue.com. Real easy, and we can get you connected with them. Otherwise, it's been a great edition of the Zero Trust Issues podcast. Joe, any final words?
No, really interesting, guys. We appreciate you being here. Appreciate all your help. I think we got to figure out a way to make sure you guys are regulars here. I think the boots on the ground experience matters a lot. So thank you very much.
and start training for that bear, Dylan. Take care, everybody. Have a great
I'm
day.
a runner for a reason.
Dylan, you're going down.
Thanks,
no. I train jujitsu, so I'm good. I can take the bear.
Good luck.
Thank you,
Nice job, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
Thanks for tuning in to Zero Trust Issues. Be sure to click follow so you never miss an episode. And visit AgileBlue.com to learn more about how AI-native cybersecurity can protect your business. The information shared in this podcast represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily reflect those of AgileBlue. This content is provided for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as professional cybersecurity, legal, or business advice. Always consult qualified professionals regarding your organization's specific needs or circumstances.